Item is to adjourn as the HCOG board and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And at this time, is there any public comment? Seeing none. Oh, yes. I'm ready to go. So can we get a roll call?
Chair Johnson,
Here.
Mayor Jones,
Here.
Supervisor Madrone, Mayor Burgell,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Here.
Councilmember West,
Here.
Councilmember Orr,
Here.
Pack Member Arroyo, Pack Member Allstrand.
Here.
Thank you. And having adjourned as the HCOG board and convened as the Policy Advisory Committee, we'll allow PAC member Arroyo a moment.
Hey, a really cute dog. These things happen.
It's that kind of a day, I think. And we will see if a public comment, and seeing none. At this time, we have a presentation, our fiscal year 22-23 TDA Development Act audits with Mr. Keith Borges.
All right. Yeah, Keith will present the audits, and I'll be happy to work with him on answering any questions that follow. Keith's done our audits for a number of years now, and we really, really appreciate his effort. A little bit like herding cats. Sometimes we have a lot of agencies that get audited. So yeah, definitely huge thank you for all your efforts and keeping us on track.
Okay, I'm here this afternoon to make a presentation of the last audit cycle for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023. Most of the audits that make up HCOG's audit were completed in advance of the March 31st audit deadline. There were a couple, HTA and Arcata, that we didn't get completed until after that, but they all are done now and ready to be submitted to the state. As most of you know that have been through this a few years, the annual audit of HCOG consists of auditing two JPAs, HCOG as the RTPA and Humboldt Transit Authority, as well as auditing the transit-related funds for the 7 cities and the county. For HCOG and HTA, it results in just a traditional full-blown audit of those entities. They get a full, complete set of governmental financial statements and all the bells and whistles for those. For HCOG, that consists mainly of your operational activities, as well as the activities where you function as a fiduciary, which means handling the pass-through funds to the cities and the county. And that covers the allocation, the apportionment and disbursement of those funds to the various cities, where we then audit those monies at the claimant level. So for those claimant level audits, as I mentioned, we're just looking at 1 or maybe 2 funds within the city or the county, so a very focused audit just for the use of the funds that flow through HCOG, either through operational or as a fiduciary. So for each of those claimants, we prepare a set of financial statements for that fund or funds, as well as testing compliance for any transit or non-transit uses that they might have of those monies. So each of those reports, and I know you get a copy of each of those claimant audits as well. There will be an auditor's report and notes to the financial statements, but it'll be a much abbreviated version from what you're used to seeing at your own cities, because again, it only relates to 1 or 2 funds. If there are any findings that come out of our compliance work, those will be noted in the report, as well as included in our overall management letter that we generate to HCOG and that we'll be touching on shortly. For HCOG, again, as a full-blown audited entity, we're going to look at all of the operational activities and the activities where you act as a fiduciary. Now, for the operational side, there are two funds that we track. One includes your state money, your planning money, your PPM money, grant funds and things of that nature. And the other one is for the SAFE fund, which has its own dedicated fund. The report for HCOG in general, it consists of two sets of financial statements, which is the requirement for any governmental entity. And those are included on pages 9 through 16 of the HCOG audit. Overall, there is an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is the opinion you want. It means that the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The full accrual method, or the full accrual financial statement, those are what's called the government-wide, and it's required to present HCOG's activities on a full accrual basis, which means giving recognition to all of those wonderful future liabilities like pensions and other post-employment retirement benefits and so on. It also includes the recognizing the deferred outflows and inflows of resources. That is some terminology that is mainly connected to the pension and OPEB liabilities. And in looking at those items in total from 2022 to 2023, there wasn't much of a change, really only about $80,000. So even though on the face of the statement it looks like your pension liability went way up and your OPEB liability went way up, part of the reason for that is that we're using a year ago's information for those liabilities. There's a gap in time, and that's what the deferred inflows and outflows cover. They cover what's gone on since the measurement date of June 30, 2022, which is where your OPEB or your pension liability comes from. It just takes them that long, takes the state a while to get the final numbers together. And overall, recognizing those liabilities is what causes the full accrual set of statements to result in a negative net assets, because recognizing the couple $1 million of future liability, turns it from a positive to a negative. So, and it didn't really change much from last year to this year as well, that negative fund balance or deficit. For the governmental presentation, that's the more traditional set of statements that you're going to see. And again, it's the basis on which you operate. It's the money coming in, the money going out. None of these long-time future liabilities. This year on the balance sheet, HCOG got about $2.6 million in assets, most of which is just cash. SAFE fund about $1.3 million, and an accumulated $1 million in the other funds. On the operating statement, you're showing a surplus this year of revenues in excess of the expenses of about $350,000. And that was mainly driven by the REAP grant that came in of over $600,000, and only a small amount of those funds were actually spent by the end of the fiscal year. So we would expect to see that flip around next year when the rest of the monies get spent, and they'll show up as expenditures with no corresponding revenue. And again, your operational funds on the governmental presentation show a positive fund balance of a little over $600,000, and that has stayed pretty constant from last year to this year as well. Following the regular the operational financial statements, there are some statements for the fiduciary activities. And again, that just kind of covers the monies coming in and then going out to the other claimants and cities. And again, we'll test them at that level. Other parts of the statement that are included is on pages 3 to 8 is the management's discussion and analysis, which is a section that is HCOG summarizing the year's activities in language that is a little bit easier for folks to understand, talking about some of the changes, increases and decreases, and something that's not quite so stilted as what you get in the traditional financial statements. There's also 13 or 14 pages of required footnote disclosures, mostly covering your pension and OPEB liabilities. And then the end of the audit report, there's 5 or 6 pages of some required supplementary schedules, mainly dealing with the pension plans. And so that's the HCOG's basic audit report or audited statement. And again, in addition, we always prepare what we term a management letter, which includes a couple different things. It includes a couple required communications that, as auditors, we're required to make to management. One is if there are any type of findings, and 2, there's a required communication with those charged with governance. And that's a report that summarizes how the audit went, kind of on a global perspective. Did we encounter any problems? Were there any difficulties? Any issues with management who wouldn't answer questions or do anything of that nature? And obviously that was not the case. Never has been. But those reports are required to be included in your audit. So we put those in the management letter along with what we would call our more traditional compliance findings, which are the items that flow out of our testing at the claimant and the entity level. And the management letter on pages 5 to 8 includes those items, and it typically addresses the status of findings from prior years as a start. The most common findings that we have are fund eligibility findings or fare box ratio findings. Those are the main ones that get looked at for the transit providers. And we only have one prior year excess fund eligibility finding, and that was for the city of Fortuna from the 21 year. And that has been resolved and addressed on the 6/30/23 claim. There's usually a 2-year gap or 2-year lag between when a finding is noted and when it gets addressed because of the fact that there's a interim year in between. But that one has been resolved. The second carryover finding has to do with the City of Arcata's Greyhound bus program. And that is, for those of you that have been on the board, it's been there for a few years as that program has over time run at a deficit. And even though the last couple of years it has broken even, it's come pretty close to breaking even, covering its costs on an annual basis. There was a period of time that was not the case. And so there's an accumulated amount of a deficit that program ran at. And there's still at some point, even if the program ends, which I understand it's close to ending, that deficit, there needs to be a plan for how that deficit gets resolved in terms of, there's been some preliminary talks between the city and HCOG in terms of revisiting some of the allocations of the expenses that had gotten charged to the Greyhound program over the years, or possibly coming up with some additional funding sources. But the finding, of course, will remain even if the program ends until there's a resolution can be addressed between HCOG and the city. In terms of the fare box ratio, City of Fortuna has had a finding there. Last year it had a finding that it did not meet its 10% required fare box recovery ratio. Due to COVID, there was relief provisions granted so that there was no corrective actions needed. But in general, if a transit provider doesn't meet the required fare box ratio, the amount of the shortfall is required to be reduced from a following year's TDA claim. So even though there was approximately a $10,000 shortfall in the June 22 year, nothing was required on the city's part. We'll see that same finding again this year. I'm not exactly sure how long. I believe the COVID relief still continues, I think through 2024, but it may not after that. Then we'd be getting back to potentially having an issue to deal with. They've already used their one-time grace year, which is given to all the providers. That was used a couple years ago. And the last two prior findings had to do with some timing issues. The code requires that claimants are all supposed to submit their TDA claims by April 1st, which is kind of an arbitrary date, but that's the date in the code. And that's just a very difficult timeline for most of them to meet, and traditionally that just hasn't happened. So even though it's not likely, and there's really nothing really flows out of that if the claims are submitted after that date. But we've encouraged HCOG to kind of work with the claimants to try to do what they can to facilitate, if possible, getting those claims filed. And then I mentioned before that the audits for Arcata and HTA did not get completed in time by the March 31st deadline. That was the case last year as well, some of you may remember. So we're getting closer. It's been I know a transitional year at Arcata, and HTA is just a big audit, and we'll work on it, continue to work on those. Then for the current year findings, there's one entity with a fund eligibility finding, and that was the City of Arcata. Fund eligibility, as you mostly know, is a claimant is only eligible to cover the amount of their operating costs for their transit system, less the fares that they collect, and less any other funding that comes from other sources. So when the calculation was done for Arcata, their operating costs, less their fares, they received a big chunk of STA money that year, and I think possibly some other operating funds that came in. But it results in an excess amount that they claimed for operations of about $180,000. Again, this is a common finding for entities to have when it happens. Because remember, it's very difficult to be planning a year and a half in advance when you claim your money to know what actually will end up getting spent down the road. When this does happen, the remedies are, and the most common one is they simply reduce a succeeding year's claim by the amount of the excess from the current year. The money's there, it's in-house, on hand, so it's simply a matter of acknowledging that we can reduce what we otherwise would have claimed for the current year by the money we already have. Alternatively, they can also re-identify the excess as being claimed for a capital use rather than an operating purposes if they in fact had spent money, non-capital money, on capital assets. So if they had used some of their reserves, possibly maybe some matching monies of their own funds to acquire a capital assets, we can sometimes simply redesignate this amount of money and take care of it that way. Then fare box ratio for City of Fortuna, that was a current year one as well. Again, I mentioned this year the shortfall was about the same as last year, about $10,000. And again, because of the COVID relief, no recalculations were necessary. And then the last item is the County Auditor Controller's Office typically keeps track of the LTF money, which is your TDA money, on a claimant-by-claimant basis. So they have a pool of money over there, and it's obviously generally tracked to know how much each city's portion of that balance is. They allocate quarterly interest, accordingly, and so on. And at the time of our audit, that information wasn't really available because of, as we all know, some of the delays in interest getting posted and just the general transitions. We weren't able to drill down to get the exact amount of the fund balance part of that TDA fund that belonged to each city. Since then, that issue has been brought up with the county, with the auditor's office, and it has recently been adjusted, fixed, and brought current and up to date. So that that was a corrective action that was corrected before I could even tell you about it. So, and so that's the end of the management letter and the end of my presentation, but I will answer any questions that you might have if I can.
Anyone have a question for?
Well, I'm not specifically for you, Keith, but based on what you said, Beth, just curious, I assume that everything's going well and working with the city of Arcata to figure out every year, it seems, every year it's the same story. And I know that I feel like you are working on it, but I just want to check in to make sure that it's fine.
Yeah, I think so. I think, we were making some progress on the Greyhound and then it kind of stalled out and, it's just not everyone's most important thing to do. So when the audits come around, it's like, oh yeah, we need to get back on that and revisit it. So I think we'll do that. I think that there's better processes in place. And, like last year we were doing this meeting in August. So, a couple months sooner, baby steps. But yeah, I think we're getting there. There's no, adversarial issues, nothing like that. It's more just, the time it takes to sort some of these things out. And it is a bit, especially like for the Greyhound situation, it's like going into some archives, right? Like this is a very long-standing issue. So it's like almost like a historical analysis of sorts. So I think that's kind of some of the delays there. But yeah, I think it is getting better and we see progress just in, the couple years I've been here.
All right. Thank you. That's good to hear.
Any other questions, comments? And I don't see Supervisor Madrone doesn't have his hand up. So again, there's a lot of detail in there and a lot of things to go over, and you guys do a remarkable job on all that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, thank you. And at this time, we will,
Should we take some action on this item, Chair?
well, I'm looking at that to see
can-
what's, I don't see
it's-
the staff report.
Hang on. This is, really the action here is just that you don't even really need to vote on this. It's just that we're receiving and filing these audits. So you need to receive the presentation, but you don't really need to, give a full vote on it.
All right. Well, it has definitely been received. We come now to the consent calendar with 4 items: the meeting record approval, TDA, bike and ped allocation requests, approval of the funding agreement between HTA, the City of Arcata, the county, and HCOG with Dial-A-Ride, and the 23-24 RSTP policy and allocations. Does anybody have anything they'd like to pull, or any public comment? I don't think so. So we'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
We had a motion and a second. Do we need roll call? We have a person online, so
Chair Johnson,
yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Burgell,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Councilmember Orr,
Yes.
Pack Member Arroyo,
Yes.
Pack Member Allstrand.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. We have nothing that was removed, and there is no action items today. So at this time, by motion, we'll reconvene as the HCOG board and approve the PAC recommendations.
I'll motion that we reconvene as the HCOG board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Chair Johnson,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Burgell,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Councilmember Orr,
Yes.
Pack Member Arroyo. Oh, wait.
I don't
never
think
mind.
I vote on this one.
All right.
All right, well, just to confuse things a little bit here, we have a HCOG board consent item. Authorization to execute the standard agreement between Humboldt County Service Authority for Freeway Emergencies and the California Highway Patrol for dispatch and assistance with roadside call boxes. Did we all get a chance to read that? And are there any questions or comments from the board?
Just that you'll be acting as the safe.
Okay, he does have his hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to do my due diligence and explain why I'm attending remotely. I have a bad cold, and I did not want to bring that into the diet. So that's why I'm attending remotely. Thank you.
Thank you for your diligence. I think we have that by acclamation.
Chair Johnson, I have a process question about this, or I have a question about the item, but I don't know if I'm asking it as a member of the
You
public.
would be a public comment.
I would love to.
We'll take your comment and question.
Okay, my comment question, I'll make it a comment, is I would still love to see exploration of the SAFE program for, I think in communities, particularly that are less remote and rural than ours, it's used in this more standard way. And I would love to see exploration of other uses like roadside assistance, not by CHP, by volunteer fire departments, et cetera. And the continued consideration of call boxes and other areas where I think my understanding is that the 36 and 96 call boxes have happened, but that there's potentially an opportunity to continue exploring those needs. But I particularly like to give voice to that idea of having additional responders be able to be compensated through the program.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I can give a couple updates. So we did get the new call boxes installed. They've been very well received, and we've actually received comments that people are grateful to see them going in, and they've already gotten some use. And since that time, we did get requests for more call boxes to go in, which we're following up on. So the Yurok tribe has requested call boxes on Bald Hills Road, and even though that's not a highway, it does still qualify. So we can consider that. So we're working with them on appropriate locations and making sure that the program can fund that. And then we did also get more requests on 299 for certain areas that are dead zones, and that we know that the Willow Creek Volunteer Fire Department has been responding. So in addition to those requests for new call boxes that we're exploring, we did have a preliminary meeting with Willow Creek Volunteer Fire. Thank you to Supervisor Arroyo for kind of making that connection to begin exploring, could these funds be used to support fire districts that are also responding to freeway emergencies and often are the first on the scene? We have a whole lot of volunteer fire districts in Humboldt County, and the SAFE program is limited in funds. So we'd want to be able to really figure out, an equitable way to be responsive to that. If they are responding to freeway emergencies, then it is, potentially an eligible use. So we'd look at, where are they really the first responders? So in areas that are in fire safe or CAL FIRE protection areas, CAL FIRE might be on the hook to be the first responders. There's some certain pockets of our county that's not the case. So there might be a way to, rather than kind of have it a free for all of all volunteer fire departments, to really hone in on, well, who's responding for freeway emergencies in the case where they are sort of the first response. And that may give us enough of a small enough pool that we could have a meaningful contribution. So we are exploring that. We've had one meeting and have gone back and forth with some additional questions. So certainly not a fast process, but we are looking into it, and would be happy to provide that support if we can. Generally speaking, the SAFE program, has a very narrow focus and is pretty well funded. So we would love to make sure we're putting as much of that money back into the community as possible. And we need to make sure we're following the rules while we'll do that, and also not, overcommitting the program so that we can't run the call boxes into the future. So, proceed proceeding with that balance in mind, but happy to keep looking into these avenues.
All right, well, thank you. And it looks like you've begun the process. Is there any other questions or comments? And Supervisor Madrone's hand's up again.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Natalie, for bringing that up. And thank you, Beth, for your detailed response. The vast majority of calls for Willow Creek in particular are medical calls on 299. And, you know, we are funding the ambulance service, and it's wonderful to have call boxes, but neither of those extract the victims from down the hill 100, 300 feet. That's the volunteer fire department. And these responses are absolutely stressing these small departments to their limit, beyond their limit. So I appreciate what you said, Beth, in terms of, you know, we can't have a free-for-all here, but I do know that there are certain departments that this is a huge burden for. So I appreciate anything that can be done there. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, no more questions, no public comment. So we ask for a motion.
I would move that the HCOG board, acting in the capacity of the Service Authority for Freeway Emergencies, will adopt Resolution 24-14, authorizing the execution of a standard agreement with the California Highway Patrol for dispatch services and assistance with the roadside call box program.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Chair Johnson,
Yes.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone,
Yes.
Mayor Burgell,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Councilmember Orr.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And we come now to our staff and PAC member reports, and with Executive Director Burks.
Okay, I'll go first.
Oh.
I want to just mention a very few things. One is a new campaign we're running funded by the REAP 1.0 program, and that's the KEYS campaign. This is another effort to share housing-related information with our community. So please, if you aren't already connected with HCOG via Facebook or Instagram, please do. There's a whole lot of information going up about some of the housing challenges our community is facing, some good statistics and some good personal stories that are being shared through those platforms. We also have it added to the landing page on our website, which the new website is now live and up and going. But please, we're getting specifically on Instagram a lot of traction with that campaign. We had a little bit of REAP 1.0 funding left. We're really coming to the very end of that grant program, and we wanted to make sure that we used every penny. So we realized we had some outreach dollars left, and we're also using through this campaign to again highlight that multimedia catalog that was created earlier. There were some videos we showed. There were some art exhibitions that went on, and that's still posted on our website. So we're kind of directing it back to those efforts as well. So we're happy to make sure we can use all the funds for this program and not have to give anything back. As you heard during the audit report, we were advanced a lot of those funds. And so this is kind of the time we're really seeing that drawdown where we're sharing, paying the invoices for the different jurisdictions who took out funds through that program and using up all the rest of the educational funds that hadn't already been expended. So we're kind of down to the wire on that. And but just really encourage you to track that campaign. We've had some great success with it in terms of getting information out and seeing. The great thing about social media is we can kind of see the traction we're getting. So probably at our next board meeting, I'll ask the campaign manager to come in. We worked with Jessica Karenko, who is an independent marketing consultant, and she really put that together kind of on the spot. And so it's been really, really helpful to have her support. But I'll see if she can come in August and kind of give the full report, because the great thing is she has all those analytics that she can share with how the campaign went. Then just thank you to Chair Johnson for having me in Fortuna. Earlier this week, I did get to go speak at the chamber meeting, and just always a good opportunity to share what HCOG is up to. And a reminder for any of you, if you have any kind of clubs that would like a presentation, we're always happy to come and share what HCOG is up to. We presented at chambers and rotaries. It's if you've got any other clubs that would like to have us, happy to come and share what we're up to. And then finally, we will not be having a board meeting in July. The TAC falls on July 4th, so the TAC meeting is canceled, so we won't have any of their decisions to bring forward, and no other real strong pending business. So you can kind of mark that off that if you were planning on being here, you won't need to, and if you were going to be gone, you don't have to feel bad. But with that, I'll just say happy summertime, happy solstice today, and I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful summer, and we'll reconnect in August and be on to more business.
Well, thank you. And Caltrans report, PAC member Allstrand.
Thank you. Jeff was on the road today. He wanted to attend, but I have some updates from him. First, on the Indianola interchange, construction has been ramping up. Most of the activity to the east of the highway as the contractor builds the load transfer platform that will transmit loads from the ramps that will be constructed above down to the columns installed in the ground. This will also be the future location of the northbound lanes detour later this year, when the traffic is shifted to the east to complete the column installation where the current northbound lanes exist. The contractor will soon begin installation of the remaining columns in the median, and we just want to remind everyone to adhere to the 40-mile-per-hour speed limit posted for the construction zone. The Ferndale Access Project. We're currently developing potential project alternatives based on community input. Some of those alternatives look at preserving the existing bridge, which our structures team is currently assessing if it is feasible. We expect to have completed our initial analysis of the draft alternatives by early September, and we'll follow up with another public meeting to present the findings and receive additional input. And last, the State Route 255 Manila Corridor Management Plan will be hosting a public open house on June 27th at 5:30 at the Manila Community Center, and you can attend either virtually or in person. The presentation will be showcasing how input from residents has been incorporated into the plan, and it will also be an opportunity to talk to Caltrans staff, and there's more information on our website. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you. And
I was just going to ask or mention that I've noticed that the Caltrans has decided to do a tunnel up at the Last Chance grade, and I wondered if you might want to make a few extra remarks on any information you can give to the board about the timeline or how that's going to be going. I know it just broke in the news, so it's kind of a new thing, but it was very fascinating to read and see the design and have a decision finally.
Right. Yeah, you're right. That information did just come out that the tunnel was to be determined as the alternative. I didn't prepare to talk about it today, but certainly next time in the August meeting, I'll have more information.
Good, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I realize it's very new. Thanks.
I just want to say how nice it is to drive along the new trail and look what you're doing to get that trail put in. However, when you go through the 40-mile-an-hour zone, I don't know how to slow down enough to not be a burden on all the cars, because nobody is really not doing very well in terms of keeping the cars slow, which is too bad.
I agree. Yeah.
any other questions or comments? Or board member reports?
Well, I'll jump in. Okay, hi. Out in Blue Lake, we're having Annie and Mary Day on Sunday, July 14th. And one of the things I wanted to mention for that has to do with transportation is the Citizens for Responsible Transportation is having a table that day, and they're offering bicycle valet services. So if anybody bikes out to Blue Lake, they'll have a safe place to leave their bikes with that table. And then there's also a rumor, which I can almost confirm, that there will be 200 feet of temporary track put on our Annie and Mary Rail Trail for a speeder train to be brought out on Annie and Mary Day. So it's a little bit like having the train back. Thank you.
Those guys do a great job when they get those things going.
Oh, yeah, I like that speeder train. I've done it myself with my grandchildren.
Any other? Yes, Pack Member Arroyo.
Thank you. Today is National Dump the Pump Day, which is a day intended to promote using transit for commuting. So it might be a little late for everyone here, but I just wanted to give voice to that and say HTA has been promoting it. In addition to that, we have both a summer youth pass going on and a senior free rides for both seniors and youth. So that's specifically people 62 and over riding free now through the end of August. And then, excuse me, I'm going to look at the age range for the youth, 17 and under. So any non-adult. So if you're between 18 and 61, sorry, but you'll still have to pay our very reasonable prices for fares. So just wanted to share that and encourage folks to share that information. There's information about it on our Instagram and Facebook pages if social media is for you and you want to kind of share the love about those free rides.
Thank you. Yes.
The city of Arcata is offering free bus rides for the month of June, and that's for all ages, but for the month of June. So it's a good time to explore and try it out.
And looks like we've reached the end of that. So at that, thank you for your participation. Thank you, Supervisor Madrone, for participating from a distance. And we will call this meeting adjourned.